So normally, nobody talks about this, but today I am, and this is so important for controlling that club face and helping you hit straighter shots. And it's all to do with a flat lead wrist. Now, if you've been on YouTube looking at instruction, you will have seen something along the lines of get a flat lead wrist. How do we square the club face? We get a flat lead wrist. We talk about the top of the backswing. The club face is square when the lead wrist is flat. Well, unfortunately, I've got some bad news for you. This is my lead wrist, which is super flat. This lead wrist is super flat. Ball went 45 degrees off to the right. So, having a flat lead wrist does not square the club face. It's an important factor, and I would urge everyone to try and work towards a flat lead wrist. But there is so much more that has to happen. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So, let me put another ball on the tee. You'll see why in a moment that ball is teed up. Let's find myself a nice delivery position. Let's say we've made a backswing, we've made a downswing, and we're into this position. My lead wrist is flat. That is important. We do need that. But watch what happens if I just uncock my wrist. The club head moves down towards the ground, but you can see that it still points way, way, way out to the right. So what actually has to happen from here to impact is, yes, we need to uncock our wrist because it's that movement that sends the club down towards the ground and the ball is on the ground. But we also have to take our forearm and re-rotate it back towards the target. Now you'll notice that the face is much squarer. So if I took the club away, took my hand and just opened up my thumb, from this position here, what we have to do is we have to push the thumb down, and we also have to rotate the logo back towards the target. Those two things that are happening. The flat lead wrist does not guarantee the club face is square. So when they happen and how they happen is super important. It's all about timing. So watch what happens if I put myself in that delivery position and I rotate my forearm and then I uncock my wrist. Well, that wouldn't really be the best way to hit the ball because you can see how the club moves too far out and above the ball and then it kind of chops down and across. That wouldn't really work. Well, what about if I uncocked my wrist first and then use my forearm? Well, again, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense because the club hit the ground around here somewhere. So what about if from this position I uncocked my wrist and rotated my forearm in sync or at the same time? Well, suddenly that looks a little bit more like what we want to see. What I'm able to do then is have a flat lead wrist and the club face square. And it's those two movements that you have to have an impact. From delivery to impact, we can't get away from it. Has to be in there. So the big difference really, and this is how we can simplify this, would be if we just think about the wrist being flat and that alone, what we can end up with is the handle being dragged in front of the club head. If we drag the handle, the club face doesn't rotate. Watch what happens when I start to use my forearm. The club head starts to catch up with my grip. Notice how they're in a straight line now. We didn't sort of have this movement here. So what I'd love you to do is put yourself into a delivery position. Wrist is flat, but I just want you to let the club head feel the weight of it. You're going to let the club head swing down, make contact with the ground, and move through to this position on the other side. Notice how the club shaft is level with the ground, and the club face and the logo on my glove point behind me. That would be very different to someone who's doing this, and you can even see there that the club face is still open. So, paw move. I'm uncocking the wrist, but I'm not using the forearm, versus the correct move, which is this. Now, the good news for you is that this movement here that I'm demonstrating is way easier to do. What I'm actually doing is I'm sort of saying, well, I'm trying to get the golf club head to swing around and pass the grip. That's what it wants to do. We don't want to be sort of forcing the grip through, leaving the face open. That's not conducive to speed, and it's not conducive to squaring that club face. What the great golfers understand is that if the club head is catching up with the grip the club head has got more speed. It's got more freedom. And what that means is that we can start to square the face through the natural movements of the golf club, rather than you, the golfer, having to feel like you manually twist the face. And I hear it all too often in lessons. You know, golfers hitting the ball to the right and they're explaining to me that they're trying to rotate the hand, or they're trying to close the face, or they're trying to flip the toe over. All incorrect movements. Just watch how I can hit a ball pretty straight from here, just by letting the weight of the club swing down and through. Possibly even slightly left. But there's my end position, and I can absolutely guarantee you that I didn't think about the club face. There was no attempt to roll the toe over or square the face. I simply uncocked my wrist, rotated my forearm, and let the club move on its own natural path around my body. That's how we square the face. How are these great players able to do it time after time after time if it's a manual twist of the club face? It's not. What they're doing is they're finding a fantastic delivery position with a flat lead wrist, and they are then letting the club head swing freely past their hands. Now, we know that with an iron we want the hands to be slightly forward. That's absolutely fine. It just means that we have to delay that moment for a little bit longer, and so when the club starts to release, it hasn't quite caught up with the hands. But that little exercise that I just demonstrated with one hand, really, really good for you to understand how simple and how easy squaring the club face can be. We don't want to be doing this. Dragging the handle, raising the shoulder, too much movement of the grip towards the target. The club isn't swinging past the handle. If you can let the club swing past the handle, trust me, it's dead easy to hit straight golf shots, dead easy. And it's repeatable because you're not manually doing it. So, what many people don't talk about is that a flat lead wrist does not square the face. It's a component, it's an important component, but it doesn't guarantee that the face is square. So don't spend all your time trying to get this flat here, because it doesn't mean that the club face is going to square at impact. There is another element. So, let's see if I can put it all together and get this ball somewhere on that green. Safe, but it's on the green.